Namaste, grace, peace. Welcome to Jack Colley's Black Book. This is episode 76, and the title of this episode is What is Love? And then I have kind of a subtitle, which is An Expression of X with a question mark. So I want to continue giving to my students, giving to people who come to my workshops, giving to people who are going to join me in a discussion group that you can find on godsandbox.com. So if you are interested in interacting with me on a regular basis, please go to godsandbox.com and sign up for one of the discussion groups. And you'll hear more teachings like this, only we get to actually have dialogue, which is so much nicer than me talking to a screen. But what is love? It's an expression of X, or is an expression of X some part of love? And so first of all, we got some things that we have to at least introduce. Now, most of you who know me and have been in my workshops, discussion groups, that sort of things, you know what I mean by X. So really quickly, let me tell you what I mean by X, and then we're going to talk about a really important model that has to do with X, and that is Sternberg's triangle theory, triangular model of love. Now, I put on a workshop once a year. I'm putting on one coming up. Again, godsandbox.com if you want to join me for this. But I'm going to show you the main slide and the main foundational premise of this workshop so that you can understand what X is. So I'm going to go through this really quickly because I want to more focus on love. And then if you want to take the workshop and see this expanded more, please do so. X is an unknown. It is an unknown, the X factor. We just don't know what it is. We call it X. Interestingly enough, X is also used in Xmas. So this workshop is called Xmas for Heretics, and it takes place around November. But Xmas, X is also considered an abbreviation for the term Christ. All right, so hang with me right now, but basically X is whatever existed before the Big Bang. So if you take whatever existed before the Big Bang and you put it into matter and energy, which is, in effect, what we're talking about with respect to the Big Bang, you get the first incarnation of X, of this unknown, the first incarnation of Christ, which is matter and energy. So going really quickly through this, Xmas, Christmas, is the point, at least within the Christian tradition, where we say the birth in the manger is the first incarnation where all of X went into an infant to experience life and show us how to live as human beings. So this incarnation is really important at Christmas, or at Xmas is what we call it. We look at this as kind of the second or the third incarnation. And then if we continue here, I even have a cool manger scene there. If we continue here, of course, time keeps playing out and you are here, and we have all of our future and we have all of our past to look forward. But that is the idea of X. X is everything that existed or whatever existed before the Big Bang to basically incarnate. So all of X is incarnated in everything that we see, everything that we touch, all of our five senses or six senses. It's all there. All right, so that is X. It's an unknown. I'm just going to call it Christ. And there must be a certain nature or a certain function of that X. And then now you're hopefully starting to see that I'm going to make the suggestion that I make in all of my workshops and discussion groups that this unknown, we can call it God or we can call it love. But for our purposes of this video, we're going to call it love. But more specifically, we're going to say, how is that love expressed? And there's a really cool model that I really, really like. And that is Sternberg's triangle model of consummate love. So let's take a look at this. And I'm just going to talk about this with the understanding that there is the way that love is expressed through our human experience. All right. So this is really going to set up an important distinction and help you to predict what the next videos are going to be about. There is love that is experienced through our 5 or 6 senses, through us and another human being, through relationship. There's that type of love that we experience. And if we experience love in the physical world or in the model world or in the institution or in however you want to explain it, if we experience love within these constructs, love is going to be limited. So I hope that by the time we get to the last of these series of Jack Colley's Black Book, you will have an understanding of love that some of you will be able to accept, and your lives will be changed because you will be able to understand the type of love that is rooting for you, pulling for you, that is yours already, that is inside of you, that is inside everything already. Call it the Christ, call it love, call it God, call it an unknown. Doesn't matter to me what you call it. What matters to me is that you experience it. And I think that that's really what universe, God, love would want for us. So, but let's take a look at least this model to understand how it plays out between us humans. Because I think just in considering this, it will probably move you further along with respect to just this general understanding of I love you, or this is love, or love means this. So Sternberg had this idea of consummate love. Love, again, really hard to define, but we can put pieces and parts on it, and we can start to kind of build around it to kind of see what it's like. Consummate. Now, consummation typically is a term used in a relationship, meaning sexual intimacy. So this consummate love, this particular triangle, I think was originally developed with the idea that it would be between a lifelong committed monogamous couple. I'm going to use the term consummate in a little bit different way to help broaden the influence of love. So if you Google consummate, you will get words like consummate is expert. It's a perfect love. It's if you're consummate in something, you are you have full knowledge of it. You know how it works. It is a thing that you are an expert in. So that's consummate love. And there's 3 parts of consummate love. So, and those are the 3 points. Apexes, I think, is the fancy word, but the 3 points of the triangle. There's 3. And I'm going to define these maybe in a little bit different, a little broader terms than I think what Sternberg wanted. So 3 parts. First of all, if you look at the red up there, so the maroon, it says intimacy. Now I'm going to define intimacy as more than just sexual intimacy. Intimacy is what you have with your best friend. It's what you have with significant others who are really close to you. Yes, it's what you have with your partners. You can have intimacy with your children to some degree. And we're going to define it this way, though. So not necessarily always sexual. But intimacy is the opportunity to show up and be known. So intimacy to me is showing up with your other, showing up with people figuratively naked. Another way to put that is figuratively vulnerable. To have this confidence that you can show up and you can truly be yourself, no matter what mistakes you made. Sometimes we say your warts and scars and all that sort of thing. You can show up as you are, and you can experience intimacy. You can experience love. So I'm going to define intimacy that way. Now, within the context of a committed relationship, a lifelong monogamous committed relationship, we would also include sexual intimacy with that. Although we will see that doesn't necessarily preclude people from experiencing some level of this love either. Now, go down to the bottom. Let's go to the bottom left next. So passion. In my mind, yes, between a monogamous couple, there ought to be passion, and that passion ought to last throughout the marriage or the monogamous relationship. However, passion can also be what you have with your best friend around a certain affinity. So my friends and I have a passion for going to concerts, something we look forward to. We have a passion for good food and good company. So that's something that we're passionate about, and we make sure it happens because we enjoy that space. And so even that has a different has level that is not necessarily within a marriage or a lifelong committed monogamous relationship. You can also have a passion between parent and child, which just means you have an affinity. You know what each other likes, and you meet them where they're at to make that happen. So it might be sharing in a sport or sharing in learning an instrument. It may be, just going to the playground, having fun with your kids. All of that, just spending a Saturday afternoon, going to the zoo, all of those things can be passions in a sense, or affinities might be a better word to kind of take off the sexualized edge of passion. But hopefully you understand what I'm saying. There's that component of you share something with the individual that's important. And then the blue triangle to the right there is commitment. And in order to have a consummate love, to have a consummate relationship, and really that's another thing that I thought of too, because to me, I would rather, instead of this saying consummate love, it would have been nice had this said consummate relationships. And you'll understand if you watch the other videos that I'll make down the road here. And but anyway, commitment. There has to be some level of commitment. There has to be some sort of repetition to engaging each other. There has to be some sort of predictability and safety with respect to, if you're going to be in a relationship, one of the most important things you can do is to be able to count on that other person with showing up, and you show up, and you kind of do this dance together. So those three things are really important aspects of consummate relationship. So I'll change the word to relationship, because as you'll see, this is really not talking about love. This is where we're going to go, but we're going to start here in terms of how love is expressed. So consummate relationships. Now, I want to go kind of to the next point really quickly, because the next point is this. If you have, well, let's do it this way. If you think about the concept of sin, again, something I teach in the workshops and the discussion groups, look them up on godsandbox.com. Look them up. There's this idea of sin, and this idea of sin is often thrown around as a way to control you and as a way to guilt you and shame you for doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, all of this stuff. Religious institutions have done an incredible job of taking this word sin and just applying it in a very judgmental, gross, manipulative, vulgar way, that all they do is they say, you sinned, you sin, you're a sinner, all this stuff, and you need to be saved. And, you can just see the manipulation, with respect to, hey, you're doing that wrong and you should really do it more like me. So we're going to redefine this term sin. So this term sin is this. The term sin, I want you to think of as an archery term. I've heard this. I don't know that there's a lot of research to support this, but I've heard this and I really like it. So the idea is, if somebody's learning to be an archer, they pull back the string, so they notch the arrow, they pull back the string and they shoot the arrow. And the target is down there far enough that they are unable to see if the arrow hit the bullseye. And so somebody down there is looking at the target, and then they yell back, sin, meaning you missed the mark. You missed where you were supposed to shoot. Now, here's where I'm going to part ways with a lot of institutionalized religion. A lot of religious institutions would go to the person who's learning how to shoot the arrow, and they would shame them. I can't believe you are totally useless. You can't do anything right. You're sinning. You need to fix this. You need to. And they will guilt you. They'll guilt you. Oh, man, you are making God so sad that you sinned. Oh, you sinned and you are making God sad. God is just up there crying God's eyes out because he's just so disappointed in you that you sinned. And you can kind of see where this is going, right? It's judgmental, as if you know how to shoot better than me, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but there's some things I can do better than you. Anytime you use the missing of the mark to guilt and shame and judge, it's inappropriate and it's gross. And why would you want to have a relationship like that with somebody who that's all they're going to do is point out that you missed and shame you for it? Rather, I think missing the mark is more about somebody who may know more about something than you coming up alongside of you and saying, hey, you missed the mark there, and I want you to know that there are some things that you can do differently to actually hit the mark. One of the things you can do differently is you can hold the bow at a different angle. Maybe you need to put less tension into the string. Maybe you have to notch the arrow 90 degrees because the odd feather is clipping the handle, or however archery works. But you can actually come alongside somebody and you can teach them how to stand correctly. That, to me, is a much better, healthier approach to missing the mark. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this model right here. So if you look at the middle of the mark as being the middle of this, where intimacy, passion, and commitment are in this perfect balance, which they never are going to be. They're always going to move around depending on your season and how you feel and all this stuff. I mean, that's just part of being human. But if we can target the middle and understand what we might be missing out on, then it becomes less about judgment and it becomes more about what are you missing? All right, so let me give you an example. Let's say that you are into hookup culture. So you go onto a website and you are looking to hook up with somebody for a one-night stand. So looking at this model here, there's definitely passion, right? You know what you want to do. I don't know how much intimacy is going to be had, really. I mean, how much are you going to really get to know another person on a one-night stand? And there's certainly not going to be any commitment. I mean, are you going to see this person again? So we don't have to judge an individual who has a one-night stand. This is the key teaching here. We don't have to judge that person. But what we could do if we love that person and have a relationship with that person is we can come alongside of them and we can say, hey, I know you enjoy a one-night stand, and I know you're consenting and they're consenting. At least I hope that that's what's happening. And the thing is, how does it feel not to have intimacy? What is it like to share that level of passion with somebody, and then you just walk away and you might not even know their name? I don't know. What does it mean not to have a commitment, to never see this person again that you just shared something with? And don't you want that type thing? So there's that sort of use of this model, which is not to guilt people and shame people, but to point out and say, you might be missing something here. Think about this. Let's think about, I know. What do they call it? Polyamory. So polyamorous relationships are relationships where there are a group of consenting adults, and sometimes there's children in this too, but there's a group of consenting adults, and they all live under one roof, and they are in relationship in a polyamorous sort of way. And there might be children. Now, there are some very, very reasonable logistical reasons for wanting to do this. I mean, just think about this. As odd as it sounds, these kids do have several adults in their lives who are able to guide them and take care of them and share the responsibilities. There are several adults who they all, have this relationship where they're all taking care of the house together, which means less work for everybody. So there are some real, logically, there are some benefits to having more people share in the work. The thing is there's also commitment, so there can be passion with the adults. Keep in mind, I'm talking about the adults here when we're talking about sexuality. There can certainly be passion between the adults in a polyamorous situation. There can certainly be a commitment. They're all committed to this deal, so there can be that. However, one might ask the question, but where's the intimacy? And I have had two students at this point. I've had, one student and a client who were in polyamorous relationships. And a lot of times what they'll say is they'll say, well, I'm in a polyamorous relationship, and once you get over the jealousy, it all works fine. And that's all well and good because, feeling jealousy is never a good thing. But here's what I want to suggest. I want to suggest that, you can get over your jealousy, but just because you get over your jealousy does not mean you're going to have intimacy. So I always like to extend things just to kind of, this will hopefully be the last example here. I like to extend things to their extreme, and I say, okay, well, I believe you can only be truly intimate, truly know one other person. And I believe as a species, we are truly monogamous. Like we're supposed to be monogamous because that's the only way you can only really truly get to know one person. And then they'll say, well, but what if you're a trio? What if it's a triad of people? You can get to know each other. And I say, well, maybe. I still think that there's some, I think it takes away a little, but certainly maybe two. But then I kind of push the limits and I say, so what do you think about five? What if you had five partners? Are all of you going to experience the same level of intimacy with the other four if there's five of you involved in this deal? And for the most part, people see where I'm going and they're able to say, yeah, I can kind of see that, and then you raise the number just to be silly. What if there's 10? What if it's 100 people? What if you live in a some sort of a communal setting where everybody's just kind of allowed to sleep around and all that stuff? Are you ever really going to experience this beautiful idea of love where you're able to show up truly yourself? And of course the answer is no. I mean, at some point it breaks down. So we can always say, this is going to be best between two people who are committed to each other. That's the way it's going to end up. That's the way it's going to be best, is if you belong to each other in a sense. So that gives you several examples, but notice the bars that are connecting the points of the triangle. If you don't have commitment, but you have passion and intimacy, we would just call that romantic love. And it's nice to be romantic. It's nice, but usually there's commitment in there. If you have commitment and intimacy, that can be companionate love. That can be a good friend. Again, I continue to argue that you can have certain passions about certain things, certain affinities, if you will, certain things that you have in common that you are passionate about. So again, I'm kind of expanding the triangle, but you get the idea. And then you can also be passionate in a committed sort of way where there's no intimacy, and that's fatuous love. That would be like a friends with benefits thing. It's like, yeah, but you're missing out on the intimacy. So good that you have these regular meeting times and you know each other on some level, some familiar level, and maybe it's very passionate, but are you really getting to know each other, through that type of a setup? Now, all of that said, because that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover here. So backing up to my slide here. Now, actually, let's go here. So here's what I'm going to suggest to you for the next video. And this is the stuff of the discussion groups I'm starting. So if you've listened to this whole thing and you enjoy this kind of learning and you would actually like to have a one-on-one conversation or a discussion within a group, go to godsandbox.com. Give me your contact information and I'll put you on my mailing list to do this. But here's where I'm going to go with this. As much as these models right here, as much as these models help bring a greater understanding of, in this case, what love is, because it's a model, by nature of it being a model, it's going to be limiting. And so what we're going to do in the next video or the next few videos or the next several videos is we're going to continue to develop this idea of love. And what we're going to do specifically is I'm going to distinguish between what existed before time, matter, and energy, what existed before all of this, and is that thing love? Is love a synonym for God? When we say God is love, what do we really mean God is love? Do we mean he has passion, intimacy, and commitment to us? And maybe on some level, but it seems like, no, there's got to be a lot more to this if it had existed before the Big Bang. So whatever you think X is, I hope to draw your attention and challenge you to believe something about love that will completely change your life. And we'll continue this discussion in the next episode. All right. Namaste, my friends, and I will see you in the next video.